Hey guys, we're going to do factoring by the GCF today. So we learned last how to find the GCF in the LCM of an expression, and now we're going to use the GCF to factor it out of an expression to simplify that expression. So when you factor out the GCF, you're going to first have to figure out what the GCF is of all the terms. That's what you were doing the last 2 days. Once you figure out the GCF, you're going to write that down outside of the parentheses. It's going to be kind of like the opposite of the distributive property. So if you had this, it's an x. Okay, we know we would distribute that 3. So it'd be 3 times x plus 3 times 5. Similarly, if you had something like for x plus 10, the GCF of that would be 2. So we could divide each of those terms by 2. Okay, it's basically just the opposite of the distributive property. You're going to take the GCF and you're going to divide both terms by that. So we divided this by 2 and this by 2. So you have 2x and 5. Okay, so you'll divide each term by the GCF, write each new term inside the parentheses, and make sure you watch your positives and negatives. All right, so again, the first thing to do is figure out the GCF. Now, if your first term is negative, you're going to factor out the negative. Okay, so we know that we're going to factor out a negative. It's going to be negative. So we need to figure out the GCF of 12, 18, and 21. The largest number you can divide all 3 of those terms by is 3. And then you have to look at the c's. So we have c squared, c to the 4th, and c cubed. The most amount of c's we can take out of all of those is c squared. Okay, you always want to pick the smallest exponent. Now let's see how this works. So that's your GCF, so we're going to factor that out. Inside the parentheses, we're going to divide each term by negative 3c. Erase that. Okay. So we're going to divide this by negative 3c squared. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now, remember, whenever you're dividing algebraic terms, you subtract the exponents. So when we do c squared divided by c squared, 2 minus 2 is 0. So that gets rid of the variable. Okay, c squared divided by c squared is just 1. So that totally gets rid of the variable in that term. Now, we're going to divide this term by negative 3c squared. When you divide a negative and a negative, it becomes positive. So this is positive now. If you factor out the negative, everything is going to change to the opposite. So 18 divided by 3 is 6, and then c squared over c, or c to the 4th over c squared. 4 minus 2 is 2. All right, and then divide this last term by negative 3 squared, 3c squared. So 21 divided by 3 is 7. 3 minus 2 gives us an exponent of 1. Okay, again, you don't need that exponent of 1. If you just put 7c, that is acceptable. All right, the next one. So we have to figure out the GCF for these terms. So the GCF of 3, 12, and 6. The largest number we can divide each of those by is 3. Then we have to look at our variable. Again, you want to pick the smallest exponent for the variable because that's the most amount of y's we can take out of each term. So the smallest exponent is 3. All right, so we're going to divide each of these terms by 3y cubed because that's our GCF. Okay, so you write the GCF and then divide each term. So 3y cubed divided by 3y cubed is just 1. Plus 12 divided by 3 is 4. And we subtract. So 6 minus 3 is 3. And then 6 divided by 3 is 2. 4 minus 3 gives us an exponent of 1. Okay. You want to double check after you get your answer that you factored out the GCF, meaning that there's nothing else in common inside of the parentheses. Okay, so if this one was a 2 or an 8 or something, you would notice that they could all also be divided by 2, so you'd have to go ahead and do that as well. Okay, so always make sure that you got the GCF. 2 more. Again, if the first term is negative, we're going to factor that out. Okay, so the GCF is going to be negative, and we have 4, 8, and 28. So the largest number we can divide all of this by is 4. And then we want to pick the variable with the smallest exponent, which is just p. Okay, so we're going to divide each of those by negative 4p. Okay, so negative becomes positive. 4 divided by 4 is just 1. 3 minus, remember these are just 1s. 3 minus 1 is 2, so that's p squared. Positive and negative gives us a negative. 8 divided by 4 gives us 2. P is the first, minus p is the first, the variable goes away. 1 minus 1 gives us 0. Negative and negative gives us positive. 28 divided by 4 gives us 7. 4 minus 1 gives us 3. Okay, then again, double checking. They don't have anything in common. You want to make sure that there's at least one term that doesn't have a p in it. Okay, because if they all had p's in it, then you could factor out more p's, or variables in general. And then make sure that the coefficients also don't have anything in common. All right, last one. So since the first term is positive, we're just going to factor out a positive. So 35, 49, and 14. The GCF is 7. And then you want to pick the variable with the smallest exponent, which in this case is 2. So we're going to factor out 7k squared. Okay, if you get a problem wrong, always go back and check your signs, because that's something very, very simple that you can mess up. So that's always a good place to start if you get a problem wrong, to go back and check your signs. If your signs are all correct, go back and check to make sure you did your division correctly. If that's correct, make sure you went back and you checked your subtraction. If that's correct, go back and make sure that you have all your variables listed. All right, so 35 divided by 7 is going to give us 5. K squared over k squared, those cancel. Again, you want one of your variables to go away. We have minus, we're going to keep that. 49 divided by 7 is 7. 3 minus 2 is 1, so we just have k to the first. 14 divided by 7 is 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. Right? Okay, so again, if you need any help, please reach out to me on Teams or email, and I will be happy to help you. And good luck.